Our lives are constantly being pushed and pulled by these invisible forces. We hardly ever think about them, but honestly, without them, our world would be just completely unrecognizable. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the one force that quite literally holds everything together.
All right, let's just dive right in. Take a look at this climber. I mean, how is she just defying gravity like that? What is physically keeping her glued to that rock? Well, the answer is the exact same force that solves a completely different puzzle, one you've definitely run into before.
Oh, you know that feeling. That initial massive grunt and effort to get a heavy couch to just budge an inch, and then suddenly it's way easier to keep it sliding across the floor. These two things, the climber on the rock and you moving that heavy box, they're both run by the very same rules, the rules of friction.
So, to figure this all out, we first have to understand the force that stops things from moving in the first place. It's called static friction, and it's all about that initial stickiness.
This picture, it shows that hidden battle just perfectly. Imagine you start pulling that block. The spring stretches, right? It shows the force you're applying is going up and up, but the block doesn't move. That's because friction is pulling back with the exact same force, matching you, blow for blow. The tension just keeps building. And then, bam, all at once it breaks free. That snap you feel is the exact moment you finally applied more force than the maximum grip of static friction. You've broken the sticking point.
So, here's the key thing to remember. Static friction isn't just one single number. Think of it like a really stubborn opponent that gets stronger the harder you push, but only up to a point. Once you push past that limit, the game completely changes. Okay, so what happens in that split second right after the snap? We've beaten the stick, and now we're moving. We've just entered the world of a totally different and actually weaker type of friction.
Here's probably the best way to think about the difference. Static friction, that's like a powerful superglue holding things down. But kinetic friction is more like the constant gritty drag of sandpaper once you're already sliding. Yeah, the sandpaper creates resistance, but it's way easier to deal with than breaking that initial superglue bond.
The source material puts it a little more formally, of course, but the core idea is exactly the same. The force you have to fight while you're sliding, that's kinetic friction, is always less than the maximum force you needed to get the thing moving to begin with. And that's it. That's why it's harder to start pushing the box than to keep it sliding.
So, now that we get the two types of friction, the stick and the slide, let's look at how engineers and physicists actually predict and calculate these forces. Because believe it or not, there's a method to the madness.
And it all starts with this one simple number, represented by the Greek letter mu. This is the coefficient of friction. Basically, it's just a number for grippiness. A high mu means tons of grip, like rubber tires on dry asphalt. A low mu means almost no grip, like, say, steel on ice. And that number plugs into this really elegant little formula. The total force of friction you can possibly get is just the grippiness of the two surfaces multiplied by the normal reaction, which is just a fancy way of saying how hard those surfaces are being squished together. It makes sense, right? More weight means more friction. These ideas were all organized by a guy named Professor Coulomb into what are basically the 5 golden rules of static friction. It always pushes back, it matches your force up to its limit, and this is the one that gets people. The amount of surface area touching actually doesn't matter. It's all about the roughness and the weight.
Okay, theory is great and all, but let's actually put it to the test in a real-world scenario. We're going to use an example straight from our source material to see exactly how these rules play out.
So here's the setup. We've got a 400 Newton body. Just think of it as a heavy box, and it's sitting on a ramp. The question is super simple. If you just let it go, does it stay put or does it start sliding down? Physics can give us a definite answer here. First up, we've got the villain of our story, gravity. A part of the box's weight is always pulling it straight down the ramp. And based on the angle of this ramp, the source calculates that downward pull to be 178.5 Newton.
But we also have our hero, friction. Using our formula, the grippiness of the ramp combined with the weight of the box creates a frictional force of 107.3 newtons pulling up the ramp, trying to hold it in place.
So you see what's happening? It's a tug-of-war. We've got 178.5 newtons of gravity pulling down versus a maximum grip of 107.3 newtons of friction pulling up. So which one is stronger? Well, the numbers don't lie. That downward pull from gravity is way stronger than the upward grip from friction, so the box is going to slide. Our little calculation just told us that if you want that box to stay put, you're going to have to give it some help and hold it back.
And look, this isn't just about boxes on ramps. This invisible force is, and I'm not exaggerating, the bedrock of our physical world. It makes almost everything we do possible.
And that brings us all the way back to our climber. She isn't using magic. She is a master of static friction. Every single handhold and foothold is a calculated use of force. She's pressing her hands and feet against the rock to maximize that F equals mu times R equation, creating just enough stick to hold her entire body weight. It's incredible.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Friction is what lets your car's tires grip the road so you can accelerate and, way more importantly, so you can brake. It's the reason the shoes on your feet can push off the ground and let you walk. It's the force that lets you pick up a glass of water without it slipping through your fingers. It is absolutely everywhere.
So if there's one thing to take away, it's this. Static friction is the unsung hero that prevents total and utter chaos. It is the force of stability. And that leaves us with a pretty wild thought, right? In a world without that initial grip, what would actually stay put?